At the 16 de Julio station in El Alto, a cable car attendant braces a gondola door with her hip while a passenger loads 2 sacks of potatoes, then sends the cabin out over the canyon rim to fall 400 meters into La Paz in the 10 minutes it takes to reach the market. On the canyon floor in Calacoto, 3,200 meters, a gardener waters a walled garden in air still thick enough to run in. On a stone staircase in Sopocachi, a domestic worker rests every 10 steps, one hand on the rail, climbing toward a house that is not her own. This is La Paz, and the plateau above it, El Alto, the administrative capital of Bolivia and the highest seat of government on Earth. Altitude sorts people the way an address does elsewhere. The wealthy pool in the warm, oxygen-rich bottom, and the poorest live nearest the sky, a plateau their grandparents reached only after the mines let them go. What follows is a climb, from the moneyed floor up the cables that carry 250,000 commuters a day, through kitchens where water never boils hot enough, to a plateau the Aymara miners' children painted every color.
Down on the canyon floor, in the district Paceños simply call Zona Sur, the streets run flat and tree-lined, and the light lingers warmer and longer than anywhere above. At roughly 3,200 meters, Zona Sur sits some 400 meters below the historic center, and those 400 meters buy everything altitude usually withholds here. More oxygen in each breath, milder nights that ask for no frost cover, gardens that stay green through a July that freezes the plateau. They also buy the steepest property prices in the city. In La Paz, the ground itself is priced by how easy it is to breathe on it. The embassies, the ministers who can choose, the families whose money is old enough to move, all of them have drifted downward over the decades until the lowest streets became the most expensive. A few gentle blocks uphill, in Calacoto, walled gardens shade embassies and cafes whose outdoor tables stay set through the night. Here, soroche, the altitude sickness that flattens newcomers 1,000 meters higher, closing the throat and pounding behind the eyes, is something that happens to other people. The families in these houses feel the mountain only as a view, and their children run the length of a block with breath to spare. Where Calacoto eases into San Miguel, the commercial heart of the South, the pavement does the rarest thing a La Paz street can do. It stays level. Shoppers move from shop front to shop front across ground that stays flat the whole way. And that unbroken flatness, unremarkable in almost any other city on Earth, is, in a vertical one, a luxury with a price. A body that never has to climb keeps its energy for other things. And in a city stacked 1,000 meters high, that spare energy is itself a form of wealth. The The wealthy of La Paz have not climbed toward the light. They have descended toward the air, settling at the warm base of a wall that everyone above them must spend the day climbing. From the railed platform at Mirador Quiliculi, high on a spur above the old center, the whole ladder lies open in a single frame. At the base sit the glass towers and walled gardens of the floor. Above them, brick homes climb rung by rung up the canyon wall, unplastered and red-brown, stacked one atop another until they thin into the plateau's edge against the sky. Nowhere else does the pattern prove itself so plainly. The costliest homes hold the bottom. The poorest press nearest the clouds. And the distance between them is measured not in neighborhoods, but in meters of altitude and lungfuls of air. The families are sorted the same way. A household on the floor sends its children down warm streets to school. A household on the rim sends its adults down the wall to clean, cook, and build in the houses far below. On one of the stone staircases that stitch the levels together, a domestic worker climbing toward a home she does not live in stops at a landing, sets down a mesh bag of oranges, and presses 2 fingers to her collarbone to count her own breathing before the last flight. She has made this climb her whole life, and still the top of it takes from her lungs what the bottom quietly returns to the family she works for. This is the plain arithmetic of a Paceño household's morning. How far up the wall a home sits decides how much of the day is spent simply moving through it. The people who keep the floor running rarely sleep on it. They gather at the top, where the land finally levels and the community that raised the plateau out of nothing is largest. On the rim, in El Alto, more than 1 million people now live, a city grown larger than the capital it looks down on, built by families who arrived with nothing and made a home nearest the cold. The people at the top of this wall do not walk down to work. They cross it in a bus that hangs from a wire.
Above the canyon, dozens of cabins, the color of boiled sweets, cross the open sky at once, each one carrying a handful of strangers over a drop of 400 meters while they read their phones, doze against the glass, or balance shopping between their feet. The teleférico, the cable car that Paceños ride the way other cities ride a bus, opened its first line in 2014. In the years since, it has grown into the largest urban cable car network on Earth. Roughly 10 lines, strung rung by rung, over a city no road can climb fast enough. Each line wears its own color, and residents navigate the canyon by them. The green down into the south, the yellow up the escarpment toward the rim. Expanded under the engineer Cesar Dockweiler, who oversaw its growth across the wall, it now carries a large share of the city up and down the mountain each day. A single fare runs about 3 bolivianos, less than $50, to cross a canyon that once swallowed the better part of a working morning. The yellow line does in 8 minutes what the canyon road cannot manage in an hour. A cabin lifts off the rim, the rooftops fall away beneath it, and the whole vertical commute turns briefly visible. The brick homes thinning below, the plateau rising ahead, the traffic on the switchbacks crawling uselessly against the grade. Inside one swaying car, a schoolgirl fogs the glass with her breath and draws a small circle in it with one finger, while beside her, a grandmother steadies a bundled market bag on both knees, the two of them riding the same wire down to the same floor where the day's work waits. Nobody points at the view. For the people in these cabins, it is simply a commute, as ordinary as a bus stop, and a good deal quieter. At the foot of the climb, at Estación Central, the ladder becomes a queue. Here, the canyon floor commuter and the plateau commuter meet the same turnstile, the same 3 Boliviano fare, the same unhurried wait. The one place in the city where the altitude gradient flattens to a single line of people. The fare has been held low on purpose, kept near the price of a bread roll, so that a domestic worker descending from the rim and a clerk climbing from the south pay the mountain the same small toll. Everything else, the wall prices differently. Rent on the canyon floor in Zona Sur can run several times what the same rooms cost on the plateau, and the money follows the air. The thicker it is, the dearer it becomes to breathe. Warmth is its own expense in a city with almost no central heating, and a sack of anything hauled up to El Alto arrives carrying the cost of the climb. Against all of it stands a national minimum wage of around 2,500 bolivianos a month, and a bowl of lunch at a market counter that costs perhaps 15. The arithmetic of a Paceño household turns on how many fares, how many climbs, and how many meals are bought away from a kitchen that sits an hour uphill. For the families on the rim, the daily descent is itself a budget line. A worker who crosses the wall twice a day spends 6 bolivianos before earning a single one. And a household sending several members down to the floor watches the fares stack into a real share of the week's wage. The quiet surcharge of living where the land is cheapest and the work is not. To live near the work is to pay for the air. To live where the air is cheap is to pay, fare by fare, for the distance. Ride to the rim, though, and step out of the station, and the first thing to reach a body is not the cold, but the smell of cinnamon. Because up here, breakfast has to fight both the thin air and the morning frost. At the top of the wall, before the sun clears the plateau's edge, the first warmth on offer is not the light, but a drink. In the market lanes of El Alto and along the upper streets of the capital, vendors ladle api, a thick, hot infusion of purple corn, cinnamon, and clove, sweetened dark and drunk scalding, into whatever cup a body brings. A Boliviano or two a serving, because at 4,000 meters, a June dawn holds near 2 degrees Celsius, and the fastest way to meet it is from the inside. A vendor tips the pot, battered aluminum blackened at its base, and pours a thread of steaming purple into a thin plastic cup that softens in the hand, cinnamon fogging the cold air above the counter, while 2 stalls down, a pressure cooker begins to hiss. It hisses for a reason. At 3,600 meters, the air presses so lightly on a pot that water gives up boiling at about 88 degrees Celsius, well short of a sea level boil. And a soup that would soften in an hour on a lowland stove needs far more time up here. So the city cooks longer than any recipe admits, seals its pots to force the heat, and builds its table around a kettle that never quite runs hot. By mid-morning, the counters change over to pastry, a crimped shell that sells for a few Bolivianos, carried out, still too hot to hold, its stew of meat and broth running down the wrist at the first careless bite. A morning here is measured this way, by the cold rather than the clock. The commerce that feeds the city is run, stall by stall, by women, the cholitas paseñas, Aymara traders in bowler hats and layered skirts, who hold the counters of nearly every market in La Paz and El Alto, and keep the cash moving through both. In the lanes above the old center, one row of stalls sells something stranger than food. The Mercado de las Brujas, the market locals call the Witches' Market, where dried herbs hang in bunches beside molded sugar tablets, bundles of incense, foil-wrapped sweets, and the dried llama fetuses that families bury in the foundations of a new house as an offering to the earth before the first brick is laid. The vendors here can read what a customer needs from a few words. A blessing for a shop about to open, a charm for a safe journey, a table of goods for an offering, and wrap it without a price until the bargaining is done. Nothing on these shelves is sold as spectacle. Each item answers a real request, laid out for people who will carry it home and use it. And in this city, the line between the stall and the altar stays thin, older than the country itself. The women who run these stalls hold more of the economy than any ledger records. Much of the trade in La Paz and El Alto is informal and paid in cash. No receipts, no contracts. The day's takings counted by hand at dusk, and it is the cholitas paseñas who move it, buying wholesale before dawn, marking up by a few Bolivianos, and turning small margins over a long day into a living. A busy stall can clear 200 or 300 Bolivianos on a strong market day, and a well-placed trader with a following can out-earn a salaried clerk in the offices far below. A market woman may be at her counter 13 or 14 hours, 6 days a week, minding a grandchild between customers, answering to no employer for any of it. The trade is inherited down the female line, a stall passed from mother to daughter, with its regular customers and its place in the row. And it anchors families that reached the plateau with nothing to sell but their labor. For the women running these counters did not grow up here. Their parents came up onto this plateau a generation ago, off the tin mountains of the south, when the tin price collapsed and the mines that had fed Bolivia for 4 centuries began closing and let them go. The plateau the miners' families reached is a plain of raw brick that runs flat to the horizon at just under 4,000 meters. And almost every building on it was raised by the family that lives inside it. El Alto grew from a scattering of houses on the rim into a city of well over 1 million people in a single generation, most of it built without architects or mortgages. A bare plot bought for a few $1,000s, a ground floor thrown up first, a shop or a workshop opened in it to earn, then another story added when there is money for it, and often a floor above it left open to the sky, with rebar rising from the roof, a promise of the next floor whenever the next windfall comes. Brick is left unplastered because plaster is cost without shelter, and the bare facades that climb the plateau are less unfinished than paused, each one a household's savings account standing in the open air. Warmth is the thing the plateau cannot buy cheaply. There is almost no central heating in El Alto, and at that altitude, the nights fall toward freezing for much of the year. So a family draws what heat it has into one room after dark. A kitchen at the back of a ground floor shop, a single bulb overhead, a pot kept on the flame, as much for the warmth it throws as for the meal inside it. A grandmother pulls a woven blanket over a child working through homework at the table, the concrete walls holding the day's cold long after the sun is down, and the household folds inward around the stove until morning. The reason so many of these families reached the plateau at all is written into a single government order. In 1985, with inflation running past 20,000% and the state near collapse, the government of President Victor Paz Estensoro issued Supreme Decree 21060, a program of shock measures that broke up the state mining company. Over the year that followed, the tin camps of Potosí and Oruro that had employed Bolivians underground for generations were emptied, and more than 20,000 mining families lost their work. The policy was called relocation, though for the miners it fired, there was nowhere to be relocated to. As the southern camps emptied, many loaded what they owned onto trucks and climbed to the one place with flat ground, cheap plots, and no one to turn them away. El Alto is, in large part, what those fired miners built when the mountains that had fed and killed their fathers were shut to them. They carried their gods up with them. In the mines of the south, where cave-ins and silicosis took men young, the workers kept two faiths at once, an offering to the earth at the surface and to the figure they call El Tío below ground, a horned effigy seated in the dark to whom miners bring cigarettes, coca leaves, and alcohol so that he will spare them and give up his ore. On the plateau, the practice survives in daylight. Before a foundation is dug or a truck takes its first fare, a family tips a splash of alcohol onto the ground for the earth, an offering that asks permission and gives thanks at once, and buries a small bundle from the witch's market beneath the first brick. The gods, once fed in the dark to buy one more shift, are now fed in the open to bless a house. The men and women who made that climb are old now, and the plateau they raised belongs increasingly to children born on it, who know the mines only as their grandparents' story and the splash of alcohol an elder tips to the earth before a new floor goes up. As the cold comes down on the brick city, it is their evening that begins.
"800 meters above the canyon floor, on the plateau the city calls El Alto, evening arrives with a cold the canyon never feels. At 4,000 meters, the sun drops and the temperature falls with it toward freezing, and the avenues that ran thick with vendors all day begin to empty stall by stall, tarpaulins folded down, wares wheeled home on handcarts. In a third-floor apartment above a hardware shop, a woman still in her bowler hat sets a pot of soup back onto the flame for a second hour, because at this height, even the reheating outlasts the recipe. And her grandchildren spread their homework across the same table under a single bulb, while the windows go black and the lights of the capital come on far below. In the milder bottom of the canyon, their family climbs down into each morning and back out of each night. Down at street level, the minibuses fill and thin, callers leaning from open doors to shout the destinations along the rim, and the smell of grilled meat and fried dough drifts from a corner where a few stalls stay lit for the workers coming up the last cable of the day. El Alto keeps its own hours. Apart from the offices below, it is a city of more than 1 million now, larger than the capital it overlooks, and after dark, it belongs entirely to the families who built it. Along the widest avenues, the plateau's flat, brick skyline breaks upward into something the rest of Bolivia had never seen. Buildings faced in electric green and red and gold, their fronts patterned after the weavings and stepped crosses of Tiwanaku, rising 5 and 6 stories over the shopfronts. Paseños call them choles, and most trace back to one man, Freddy Mamani Silvestre, a bricklayer's son from the plateau, who began covering El Alto in color in the mid-2000s and has since raised dozens of them. The pattern inside is nearly always the same. Shops at the street, a vast mirrored ballroom on the first floor, let out for weddings and coming-of-age parties, rental flats stacked above, and crowning the whole structure,
a chalet-style house where the owner lives, level with the sky. The money that raises them is Aymara money, earned in the wholesale trade, the transport lines, and the market fortunes of a city that arrived on the plateau with nothing to its name. A generation ago, these same families were selling potatoes on the ground. Now their names are worked in glass and neon across facades that can cost several $100,000. On a Saturday night, inside one of those ballrooms, a band tunes up beneath a ceiling of mirrors and colored light, while a family sets long tables for a wedding of 600 guests. The grandmother, who once hauled sacks up the wall, now seated at the head of a room her grandson designed. The generation coming up now is the first to be born to the plateau, rather than driven onto it. Their grandparents came off the tin mountains with nothing. Their parents built the brick city rung by rung, and the children walk to public universities that did not exist when El Alto was still an empty stretch of high ground. On Thursdays and Sundays, they move through the Feria 16 de Julio, among the largest open-air markets in South America, where a 16-year-old sells phone parts and second-hand laptops a few meters from where a grandmother sells the same potatoes she has sold for 40 years. Many will leave for Santa Cruz, for Spain, for the wages the plateau cannot pay, and many will stay, riding the cable down each morning to work in the capital that, within living memory, would not let their families cross its main square. They carry both the mines and the ballrooms in their family stories, and they wear neither as a burden. At the rim, as the last cabin of the evening lifts out of the station and starts its long, quiet fall toward the lights of the canyon floor, the attendant, who wedges the door open with her shoulder, sends it off and turns to the next one. And the plateau her grandparents reached only after the mines let them go, settles into the dark, holding its ground against the cold.
The domestic worker who climbed the canyon staircase at dawn, pausing at each landing to let her lungs catch up, toward a house whose floors she cleans but never sleeps in, now makes the same climb in reverse as the light goes, descending toward the cable that will lift her back up the wall to the plateau and home. One hand on the rail, the mesh bag lighter against her hip. The teleférico runs past 10 at night. A single fare still costs 3 Bolivianos. On the canyon floor, the walled gardens keep their green through the frost, and 800 meters up, the soup goes back on the flame for a second hour. Altitude here shapes every working day, deciding who climbs, who descends, and who gets to breathe easily before the morning begins again. The last cabin keeps moving through the cold,